While Americans struggled, one politician cashed in on their pain. But today, Kash Patel just exposed how deep Pelosi's corruption really goes. The evidence is undeniable, and this time, there's no escape. Stay with me, because this changes everything. The hearing room was silent. Not the kind of silence that feels calm, but the kind that feels heavy. The kind that makes the air thick, like something big is about to happen. The cameras were rolling. Every seat in the room was filled. Some were waiting for answers. Others were here to defend the lie. And then there was Kash Patel, sitting at the witness table, staring straight ahead. He was ready to expose what had been hidden for years. At the other end of the room, Nancy Pelosi, the so-called queen of corruption, the woman who had spent decades weaving a web of power, making backroom deals, playing both sides, and somehow, always walking away untouched. But today was different. Today, there was nowhere left to run. Patel leaned forward, adjusting the microphone. His voice was calm, but sharp. For years, the American people have been fed a carefully crafted illusion, but today, the truth is about to be unleashed. A murmur swept through the room. Some shuffled in their seats. Others looked toward Pelosi, waiting to see her reaction. She did not flinch. She had been here before. She knew the game. But what she did not know was how much Patel had. For decades, politicians like her had played the system. They had made laws for everyone else, while bending the rules for themselves. They had used the media to spin their own version of the truth. They had smiled in front of cameras, while selling out the very people who put them in power. And worst of all, they did it knowing they would never pay the price. But what if this time they did? What if, for the first time, the system did not protect them? What if, today, someone like Kash Patel had the proof and the courage to put an end to it? This was not just another hearing. This was not just another speech. This was a reckoning. And if you have ever felt like politicians get away with everything, just wait until you hear this. Power. It does something to people. At first, it is just about making a difference, doing what is right, serving the people. That is what they all say. But then something changes. They get a taste of control. They see how easy it is to bend the rules, to push the limits, to take just a little more than they should. And when no one stops them, they take more and more. That is how the system works. It is not broken. It was designed this way. Nancy Pelosi mastered that system. She did not just play the game, she rewrote the rules. And for decades, she made sure she always landed on top, no matter what it cost the people who put her there. The hidden deals, the public deceptions, the shocking personal gains, while the country struggled. Kash Patel sat still for a moment, letting the weight of those words sink in. Then, he pulled out a stack of papers. He did not have to raise his voice. The truth would do that for him. I want everyone in this room to listen very carefully, he said, because when I finish reading what is in my hands, no one will be able to deny what has been happening behind closed doors. The tension thickened. Pelosi leaned back in her chair, a small smirk forming on her lips. She had seen this before. Another so-called whistleblower. Another so-called set of documents. Another show. But was it really a show this time? Patel turned to the first page. His voice was steady. Over the past 20 years, Speaker Pelosi and her closest allies have engaged in a pattern of financial transactions that would be considered insider trading if committed by any ordinary citizen. While millions of Americans were struggling to make ends meet, Pelosi's wealth increased by tens of millions, all thanks to perfectly timed stock trades in industries directly impacted by policies she pushed through Congress. A wave of murmurs rolled through the room. The press scrambled to take notes. The cameras zoomed in on Pelosi's face. She did not move. She was trained for this. But something was different this time. Patel continued. Let me make this clear. These were not just lucky investments. These were calculated moves. Deals made in the shadows. Information used for personal gain, while the rest of the country suffered. He flipped to another page. In 2008, when the economy collapsed and Americans lost their homes, their jobs, their savings, Pelosi and her husband made massive stock purchases in financial institutions that received government bailouts. Those bailouts, the ones that were supposed to save the economy, she helped approve them. The silence in the room was heavy. She knew the crash was coming. She knew where the money would go. And she made sure it went right into her own pockets. A deep breath. And that is just the beginning. Imagine working your entire life, paying taxes, believing in democracy, only to realize the game was rigged against you. Imagine watching politicians promise to fight for you, only to find out they were fighting for themselves all along. Imagine losing everything in a crisis, while the people who caused it walked away richer than ever. This is not about politics. This is about power, and what people are willing to do to keep it. Pelosi finally shifted in her chair. Just slightly. But Patel noticed. Everyone did. The hearing room was no longer just a room. It was a battlefield. And Patel was just getting started. He set down the papers and looked up. "Madam Speaker, would you like to explain to the American people how you managed to make millions while they were losing everything?" Pelosi tilted her head slightly. The smirk was gone. Patel leaned forward. "Because if you do not, I will." What Patel was about to reveal would shake the entire system. The room was thick with tension. The weight of Patel's words had settled over the hearing like a dark cloud, and everyone could feel it. The politicians shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The reporters gripping their pens a little tighter. The audience holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. But Pelosi, she sat still. Her hands rested neatly on the desk in front of her, her face unreadable. A lifetime in politics had trained her well. She had faced accusations before. She had been through scandals. And every single time, she had walked away untouched. Because that was the power she built. For years, she had operated behind closed doors, protected by a system that rewarded loyalty, not honesty. She had connections in every corner, big money, big media, backdoor politics. She was not just a politician. She was a fortress. But every fortress has cracks. Patel turned to another document. His voice was steady. "Speaker Pelosi's financial empire is not an accident. It is a carefully constructed machine, built through influence, manipulation, and an unchecked ability to make policies that benefit herself." He lifted a stack of reports. In just the past decade, Pelosi and her closest allies have funneled millions into business deals that were hidden from the public. These deals were not investments. They were direct payoffs, disguised as routine transactions. Let me make this clear. While Americans were struggling to pay their rent, this is what they were really doing. Gasps rippled through the hearing room. Reporters whispered to each other, flipping through their notes, trying to keep up. The cameras zoomed in on Pelosi's face. And this time she did not smirk. Patel knew he had her attention. But he was not done. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another file. This one was different. The pages were marked classified. For the first time, Pelosi's fingers twitched. Patel flipped the file open. There are some documents the American people were never meant to see. Documents that were supposed to stay buried. But today, they are coming to light. He looked up at Pelosi. "And you know exactly what I am talking about." The room was silent. Patel turned the first page. This document details a series of high-level meetings between Speaker Pelosi and executives from major tech and pharmaceutical companies. These meetings were held in private, with no public record. And yet, weeks after these meetings, key policies were introduced that directly benefited these corporations, while the American people were told it was for their own good. A low murmur spread through the crowd. The timing of these meetings aligns perfectly with massive stock purchases made by Pelosi's husband. Millions of dollars in transactions, made just days before government contracts were awarded. If any normal citizen did this, they would be in prison. The air in the room grew heavy. The reporters had stopped whispering. The cameras stayed locked on Pelosi. For the first time, her expression changed. Her jaw tightened. Her hands clenched together. Patel had cracked a fortress. But Pelosi was not going down without a fight. She leaned forward. Her voice was sharp, but controlled. "This is nothing more than a political hit job. This so-called evidence is cherry-picked, twisted to fit a false narrative. This is a conspiracy theory, designed to distract the public from real issues." Classic denial. A move straight from the political playbook. Patel did not react. He had expected this. Pelosi continued. Let me be clear. Every transaction, every decision, every policy I have supported has been fully legal. These are baseless accusations, meant to smear my name and undermine democracy itself. The perfect political deflection. Make yourself the victim. Turn the focus away from the facts. But the facts were already out. Patel let the moment hang in the air before speaking. If this is all a conspiracy, then explain this. He held up another page. This is an email sent from a senior Pelosi aide to a private financial firm. The subject line? Upcoming legislation, sensitive information. The body of the email? A detailed breakdown of policies that were not yet public, sent directly to investors before the American people even knew they existed. Another gasp. Pelosi's lips pressed into a thin line. The room was no longer just watching. They were waiting for her to say something, to explain something. But there was nothing to say, because the truth was right there, in black and white. And that was when it happened. A voice from the audience. So, are you going to deny that too? It was not a politician, not a reporter. It was an ordinary citizen, a woman sitting in the back row. And suddenly, it was not just a hearing anymore. It was the people versus the system. Patel turned to the audience. If you have ever been tired of the corruption, if you have ever felt like politicians play by a different set of rules, then ask yourself, should they finally be held accountable? Silence. Then one voice. Yes. Another. Yes. And then it grew. The people were speaking. And this time, they were not backing down. The room felt different now. The weight of what had just been revealed lingered in the air like a storm about to break. Patel had done more than just expose Pelosi's corruption. He had ripped the mask off an entire system. But there was one final piece. One final blow that no one, not even Pelosi, saw coming. Patel took a slow breath and lifted another document. Everything we have seen here today points to a pattern of corruption. But some may still say it is just coincidence. Just smart investments. Just political maneuvering. But I want to ask you this. When does it stop being coincidence? When does it become a crime? The reporters were still scribbling notes. The cameras were locked on Pelosi. She was no longer leaning back in her chair. Her hands were clenched together, her jaw tight. The confidence she had carried into this room was slipping. And then, Patel dropped the final bombshell. We have heard the numbers. We have seen the documents. But now, let us hear something else. He reached down and pressed play. A voice filled the room. You do not have to worry about it. Everything is handled. Just make sure it gets done before the vote. It was a woman's voice. Clear, direct, familiar. Pelosi's face went pale. Because it was her. A leaked recording. The one thing she could not deny. The room erupted. Gasps. Reporters scrambling, trying to confirm what they had just heard. Even some of Pelosi's own allies turned to each other, whispering in disbelief. Patel let the recording play. They will not touch us. They never do. Just make sure it goes through, and tell him he will be taken care of. The meaning was clear. The deals, the influence, the corruption. It was not speculation anymore. It was real. It was recorded. And now it was public. Pelosi sat frozen. The fortress she had spent decades building was collapsing around her. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. This was the breaking point. The hearing room was no longer under her control. Reporters shouted over each other. The committee members whispered urgently among themselves. Even those who had defended her minutes ago were now inching away, their faces tight with panic. Because this was not just about her anymore. This was about all of them. The system had been cracked open. And now, the people were watching. Patel stood. Madam Speaker, for years, the American people have been told that corruption at this level does not exist. That these accusations are just conspiracy theories. That the system is fair, and no one is above the law. He let his words settle before continuing. But today, we have proven that wrong. Today, the people see the truth. And now, they will decide what happens next. The hearing room was in chaos. But in the midst of it all, there was one truth that could not be ignored. Something had changed. This was not just about Pelosi anymore. This was about every politician who thought they could get away with it. Every insider who played the game while ordinary Americans paid the price. And now, the people had the power to fight back. The room was spinning out of Pelosi's control. The questions were louder now, coming from every direction. Reporters fired off demands for a response. Committee members whispered to each other, their faces uncertain. The foundation beneath her was cracking. She knew she had to regain control. She straightened in her chair, cleared her throat, and forced a smirk. "This is absurd," she said, her voice sharp. "Nothing more than political theater. A desperate attempt to twist reality. I have served this country with integrity, and I will not stand for these baseless accusations." But the words held no weight. The room did not quiet. No one was buying it anymore. Patel watched her, then leaned forward. "You can deny it all you want," he said. "But the truth is out. The American people have seen it. The question is, will they allow this to continue?" He let the silence hang for a moment. America deserves better than this. And today the mask has come off. The reporters scrambled to get their final shots. The murmurs of committee members turned into hushed arguments. Even Pelosi's closest allies avoided eye contact. Then bang! The gavel slammed. The hearing was over. But the fight? It was just beginning. The screen faded to black. And across the country, millions of viewers sat in silence, stunned, angry, and ready to make their voices heard.